Abu Yusuf Yaqub ibn Ishaq Al-Kindi, commonly known as Al-Kindi, was one of the most influential philosophers, scientists, and thinkers of the Islamic Golden Age. To understand his life and work, we must travel back to the late 8th and early 9th centuries, a period marked by remarkable progress in knowledge, science, philosophy, and culture in the Islamic world. In this chapter, we will explore the socio-political context of Al-Kindi's birth, his family background, and his early childhood. Al-Kindi was born around 801 CE, 185 AH, in the city of Kufa, located in present-day Iraq. At the time, Kufa was a prominent urban center under the Abbasid Caliphate, renowned for its cultural and educational significance. Alongside Baghdad and Basra, Kufa held a special place in the Islamic world, especially noted for its contributions to Arabic language and Islamic jurisprudence, fiqh. The city was a vibrant hub where people of various faiths and ethnicities lived together, fostering a rich tradition of knowledge and scholarship. Al-Kindi was born into the Kinda tribe, a respected and ancient Arab tribe whose roots lay in southern Arabia, particularly Yemen. Before the advent of Islam, the Kinda tribe had a notable history of political and social influence. Al-Kindi's father, Ishaq ibn al-Sabah, held the governorship of Kufa, placing Al-Kindi in an educated, affluent, and politically significant family. This familial background allowed him early access to education and a natural inclination towards learning. The Islamic world of his time was characterized by a colorful diversity amid political unrest. The Abbasid Caliphate was one of the largest empires in history, with its capital Baghdad as the nerve center. Within this empire lived diverse peoples: Arabs, Persians, Christians, Jews, Indians, Turks, among others. This ethnic and cultural mosaic turned Baghdad and other cities into centers of knowledge and learning. In Baghdad, the renowned Beit al-Hikmah, or House of Wisdom, was established, serving as a center for translation, education, and research. Ancient Greek, Persian, and Indian texts were translated into Arabic and further studied. Although Al-Kindi was born in Kufa, he spent much of his professional life in this intellectual hub of Baghdad. Economically and socially, Abbasid society was undergoing significant transformations. Trade and agriculture flourished, and cities like Baghdad stood as the epitome of urban sophistication for the era. The royal court placed great importance on patronizing knowledge, science, and philosophy. Talented individuals like Al-Kindi thrived under these conditions, utilizing the opportunities to develop their intellectual pursuits. There was an increasing interest not only in religious studies, but also in philosophy, mathematics, medicine, and natural sciences. Al-Kindi was among the first to merge Islamic knowledge with that of ancient Greek and other civilizations. His family environment encouraged scholarly engagement, and the patronage of the caliphs further enriched his research. Despite political instability, internal strife, and military campaigns that affected many aspects of society, the historical, cultural, and economic context of Al-Kindi's era was conducive to nurturing great minds. In summary, Kufa during Al-Kindi's birth was a city illuminated by the light of knowledge. His family's political and social standing gave him access to education. The combination of his familial background and the global context of the time shaped Al-Kindi into the great thinker whose contributions to medieval Islamic philosophy and science remain legendary to this day. Al-Kindi's childhood unfolded within a rich and knowledge-centered environment. Born in 801 CE in the city of Kufa, he was surrounded by a family heritage of prestige and intellectual tradition. Kufa, during that time, was one of the prominent centers of Islamic civilization, where religious and philosophical debates, literature, science, and trade flourished side by side. Al-Kindi grew up breathing the air of this vibrant intellectual climate. His father, Ishaq ibn al-Kindi, was the governor of Kufa, which placed Al-Kindi in politically, socially, and culturally privileged position. Yet, the family's true pride lay not in political power, but in their love for knowledge and science. Within the household, discussions on Arabic literature, Quranic exegesis, hadith interpretation, and poetry were common. From an early age, Al-Kindi displayed exceptional intelligence and remarkable memory. He began his primary education at a maktab in Kufa. A maktab was a traditional elementary school where children learned Quranic recitation, Arabic grammar, nahw, poetry, and basic arithmetic. His teachers were astonished by his quick learning ability. By a very young age, He had memorized several long chapters of the Quran and learned faster than most of his peers. After completing his Maktab studies, Al-Kindi advanced to Kufa's scholarly circles and private tutelage. Kufa at that time was a leading center for language literature and Islamic jurisprudence. Here, he deepened his knowledge of Arabic literature, linguistics, and the basics of Islamic law. He developed a strong appreciation for pre-Islamic Arabic poetry, especially the famous Mu'allaqat poems, which helped him master the beauty and rhythm of the Arabic language. Yet Al-Kindi's thirst for knowledge went beyond religious and linguistic boundaries. During his early years, he encountered basic ideas of Greek philosophy through Arabic translations that had reached Kufa. He became fascinated with reasoning, logical analysis, and the pursuit of knowledge through evidence. Another major influence in his childhood was mathematics and astronomy. His family's wealth allowed them to hire private tutors. One Persian teacher introduced him to the fundamentals of mathematics, the basic principles of astronomy, and methods of measuring time. This early exposure planted seeds that would later make him one of the pioneering mathematicians of the Islamic world. Even in his childhood, two traits stood out in Al-Kindi: deep religious devotion and a strong inclination toward rational inquiry. This rare combination would later shape him into a philosopher who could harmonize faith and reason. He also developed a habit of observation and questioning. Whether conversing with guests at home, visiting the market, or gazing at the night sky, he always sought to learn something new. People would say that Al-Kindi was a kind of child who would ask at least 3 new questions before getting an answer to the first one. Thus, Al-Kindi's childhood and early education passed in an environment rich with religious, literary, scientific, and philosophical influences. These formative experiences laid the solid foundation for his later intellectual achievements, philosophical explorations, and scientific contributions. Al-Kindi's life story is his primary education, a phase that was not merely about learning basics, but planting the seeds of intellectual curiosity, seeds that would later blossom into advances in mathematics, philosophy, and science. When we examine any great figure, we realize they weren't born legendary. Their brilliance emerges from a long journey. In Al-Kindi's case, his early schooling was a bedrock that would elevate him to the center of the scholarly world. In this chapter, we will delve into the environment of his primary education in Kufa and Basra, the influence of his teachers, pedagogical methods, and the richness of his subject matter. First, we must understand that Kufa and Basra were esteemed centers of learning in the Islamic world. Kufa, as previously noted, was a powerful hub for Arabic language, Islamic jurisprudence, and literature. Basra was a nexus for linguistic study, poetry, and philosophy. Both cities illuminated Al-Kindi's childhood with intellectual light. Al-Kindi's primary education began in a maktab, where children learned Quranic recitation, Arabic grammar, naw, sarf, basic literary forms, and foundational reading skills. He might have sat among a small group of students, just 2 or 3, but even then his memory and linguistic aptitude stood out. The maktab teaching may have been simple in scope, but deeply foundational. Letters of the Quran, morphological patterns of Arabic words, and the rhythm and structure of the language. Even if not lyrical in Bangla, Al-Kindi's grasp of language's magic was intact. At a young age, he memorized entire Quranic surahs, and while teachers explained meanings, such as, "Why is this verse placed here? Does this word follow grammatical rules?" Al-Kindi would instinctively ask, "Why?" It was his early logical curiosity that began blossoming. But his learning wasn't confined to religious education. He was curious across disciplines. Beside the maktab, someone in Kufa Mosque might recite hadith, and Al-Kindi would ask probing questions about its relevance or implications. Arabic literature, poetry, or classical verses may have been sparse in availability at the time, but he recognized the beauty in language cadence, rhythm, and semantics. Soon, he moved on to Basra, where education reached a deeper level. Basra was a linguistic, grammatical, and rhetorical powerhouse. There, Al-Kindi studied the subtle architecture of the Arabic language, grammatical forms, dialectal distinctions, sentence analysis, and semantic projection. He realized that language is not only a communication tool, but also an instrument of reason, whether in religious exegesis, philosophical argumentation, or scientific discourse. In Basra, he began building the first temple of logic, the educators that would challenge him. When do we accept something as true without justification? What defines a credible argument? He began exploring these questions. He absorbed logical structures, such as, all humans are mortal. You are human. Therefore, you are mortal, which laid the groundwork for his later explorations in reasoning. Moreover, in Basra, education advanced to mathematics and astronomy. His family's affluence allowed hiring a private Persian tutor who taught him number theory, numeric operations, basic astronomical modeling, day-night cycles, precise timekeeping, and rudimentary mathematical calculations. These concepts, while mundane today, were revolutionary then. This tutor taught him how numbers carried a logical structure and how observing the sky could unravel the dimensions of space and time. Yet the most crucial aspect was how this primary education shaped his mind and character. On one side, he excelled in religious knowledge, Quran, Hadith, Arabic grammar, with grace. On the other, his second nature was questioning. Where did I come from? Why are numbers significant? What happens if syntax breaks its rules? Why does the sun rise in the east? This inquisitive disposition was the crucible in his childhood, embedding the foundation of logic and reason from a young age. This primary education raised him as a multidimensional scholar, not only a mathematician, but also a linguist, philosopher, and researcher. His mind accepted both the question and the answer simultaneously. Learning was not transactional, but transformational. Ultimately, this phase of childhood and primary education forged Al-Kindi's intellectual depth and thought style. When today he is remembered as a philosopher and scientist, the bedrock of that greatness lies in those formative years. In Step 4, we will observe how he moves to Baghdad, enters a house of wisdom, and begins a scholarly journey in earnest. Historical context in the early 8th and 9th centuries, the Islamic world stood at the threshold of an unprecedented era of political stability and cultural brilliance. The Abbasid Caliphate was entering its golden age. Having overthrown the Umayyad dynasty in 750 CE, the Abbasids established Baghdad as the beating heart of the Islamic Empire, not only as a political capital, but also as the epicenter of science, philosophy, medicine, literature, and the arts. This period witnessed remarkable political stability, flourishing trade networks, and a cosmopolitan culture that nurtured a new wave of intellectual awakening. Al-Kindi was born in 801 CE, right at the dawn of this intellectual renaissance. His birthplace, Kufa, was one of the earliest centers of Islamic learning, and a hub for political and cultural activities. Kufa was unique in that it brought together Arab tribes, Persian elites, and other ethnic communities, fostering an environment rich in intellectual exchange. Al-Kindi's family background placed him close to the corridors of power. His father served as a governor of Kufa, a role that was far more than administrative. Provincial governors in the Abbasid period were responsible for overseeing local economies, implementing justice, and ensuring security, all while maintaining the caliph's authority. Growing up in such an influential household, Al-Kindi was exposed from an early age to the nuances of politics and governance. At the same time, he observed firsthand how Abbasid caliphs patronized science, philosophy, and scholarship as tools to consolidate their rule. One of the Abbasid Caliphate's greatest strengths lay in its multi-ethnic empire. It encompassed vast territories stretching from Persia and parts of the Byzantine Empire to the Indian subcontinent, Central Asia, and North Africa. This vast expanse created a melting pot of cultures, languages, and intellectual traditions. Politically, the caliphs understood that ruling such a diverse empire required not only military power, but also intellectual legitimacy. This realization fueled the translation movement, a massive effort to translate Greek, Persian, and Indian works into Arabic. This initiative was centered in Baghdad's legendary Beit al-Hikmah, House of Wisdom. Al-Kindi directly benefited from this translation movement. Although Baghdad was a political nucleus, Kufa retained its importance as a center for Quranic studies, Arabic grammar, and logic. Young Al-Kindi eventually moved to Baghdad, where he forged connections with both the political elite and the intellectual community. His remarkable intellect and depth of learning soon caught the attention of the Abbasid court. The political climate under certain caliphs was especially conducive to philosophical inquiry. Caliph Al-Ma'mun, R. 813 to 833, stands out as a ruler with an insatiable curiosity for science and philosophy. He believed that true Islamic governance was strengthened not just by religious law, but by understanding the natural world. To this end, he invested heavily in translating the works of Greek philosophers. Al-Kindi was among the few Muslim thinkers who sought to harmonize this important knowledge with Islamic theological principles. However, the political environment was not without its turbulence. Power struggles, theological disputes, and occasional uprisings punctuated the Abbasid era. Some later caliphs faced political instability, which at times affected the flow of intellectual activity. Nonetheless, the early Abbasid period remained a unique historical stage, a time when political power and cultural ambition worked hand in hand to create a fertile ground for scholars like Al-Kindi. In essence, Al-Kindi's political background and historical context were defined by a rare synergy, a coexistence of politics and scholarship, where power and culture mutually reinforce each other, and intellectual freedom was seen as integral to statecraft. This was the world that shaped him, enabling him to emerge not only as the first philosopher of the Islamic world, but also as a bridge between knowledge traditions, securing his place in the annals of world history. When Al-Kindi finally arrived in Baghdad, the beating heart of the Abbasid Caliphate, it was as if destiny itself had placed him at the center of an intellectual revolution. The Baghdad of the 9th century was no ordinary city. It was a shimmering jewel of the Islamic Golden Age, a melting pot of cultures, ideas, languages, and sciences. It was here that the caliphs, particularly Al-Ma'mun and later Al-Mu'tasim, had established the legendary Beit al-Hikmah, House of Wisdom, a grand institution dedicated to the translation, preservation, and advancement of knowledge from across the known world. Greek philosophy, Indian mathematics, Persian astronomy, and Arabic scholarship all converged within its halls, creating a harmony of learning unmatched anywhere else on earth. For a man like Al-Kindi, with his sharp intellect and deep passion for knowledge, Baghdad was not just a city. It was a living library, a cosmic classroom, and a paradise of reason. Al-Kindi's talent quickly drew the attention of the caliphal court. His ability to interpret complex Greek philosophical texts and then present them in elegant Arabic made him indispensable to the intellectual elite. The Abbasid ruler saw in him not just a scholar, but also a bridge between civilizations, someone who could take the wisdom of the ancients and mold it into something that served the cultural and spiritual needs of the Islamic world. Caliph al-Ma'mun, himself a great patron of knowledge, ensured that Al-Kindi had access to the finest manuscripts and resources. When Al-Mu'tasim ascended the throne, Al-Kindi's position remained secure. In fact, he was entrusted with the education of the caliph's son, a role that reflected the immense trust and respect he commanded in courtly circles. Life in Baghdad was both intellectually stimulating and politically delicate. The Abbasid court was a place where scholarship thrived, but it was also a stage for subtle rivalries, power plays, and theological debates. The Mu'tazilite movement, with its emphasis on reason and rational theology, had a strong influence during Al-Ma'mun's reign, and Al-Kindi's philosophical outlook found much in common with it. Yet, Al-Kindi was careful to ensure that his works, while grounded in reason, never alienated the religious sensibilities of his patrons. His approach was balanced. He sought harmony between philosophy and faith, science and spirituality, intellect and revelation. In this way, he distinguished himself from other thinkers who were either too radical for religious authorities or too traditional to embrace new ideas. Within the House of Wisdom, Al-Kindi collaborated with translators, scientists, and philosophers from different lands and faiths, Muslims, Christians, Jews, and Zoroastrians. The atmosphere was one of respectful, intellectual competition. Al-Kindi supervised translations of key works by Aristotle, Plotinus, Euclid, Ptolemy, and Galen, but he went beyond mere translation. He clarified, critiqued, and expanded upon these texts, ensuring they could be integrated into the fabric of Islamic scholarship. His Arabic renditions of Greek philosophical ideas were not just literal conversions of language. They were thoughtful reinterpretations that made sense in a new cultural and theological context. The support of the Abbasid caliphs allowed Al-Kindi to work on a vast range of subjects: optics, medicine, mathematics, astronomy, music theory, meteorology, and even cryptography. His versatility stunned his contemporaries. Yet, despite his rising fame, Al-Kindi remained a man deeply devoted to the discipline of knowledge. For him, learning was not a means of personal glory, but a service to truth and an act of devotion to God. He often reminded his students and peers that wisdom was a divine gift and that the pursuit of knowledge was a form of worship. This humility, combined with his unmatched intellect, cemented his reputation as not just a philosopher, but the philosopher of the Arabs, a title he would carry for centuries. But Baghdad, as glorious as it was, also had its shadows. The same courtly patronage that could elevate a scholar to great heights could just as easily bring him down if political winds shifted. For now, however, Al-Kindi's position was unshakable, his influence growing, and his works beginning to circulate widely. This period in Baghdad was the zenith of his intellectual career, a time when the philosopher stood at the very intersection of the old world wisdom and the new world's promise, shaping the future of knowledge for generations to come. One of the most significant phases of Al-Kindi's life and work was his remarkable effort to harmonize philosophy, science, and logic, which established him not only as a leading thinker in the Islamic world, but also as one of the greatest medieval scholars in global history. During this period, under the patronage of Caliph al-Mu'tasim and his successors, Al-Kindi continued his extensive work in translation, research, and writing. He absorbed a vast range of knowledge from Greek, Syriac, and Sanskrit sources, translating and adapting them into Arabic, thus opening new intellectual horizons. Al-Kindi's era witnessed the transformation of Baghdad's famed Beit al-Hikmah, House of Wisdom, into an intellectual powerhouse akin to the modern-day universities of Oxford and Cambridge, where Greek philosophical works were translated and reconstructed to the lens of Islamic thought. During this period, Al-Kindi advanced his philosophy to a level where philosophy was no longer seen as an adversary of theology, but rather as its companion. He maintained that the source of all truth is one, deriving from God. Therefore, there could be no fundamental conflict between religious and philosophical truth. He carefully studied the works of Aristotle, Plato, and Neoplatonic philosophers, accepting elements compatible with Islamic doctrine and reinterpreting those that appeared inconsistent. For instance, he endeavored to reconcile the Neoplatonic concept of the One with the Islamic doctrine of Tawhid, the oneness of God, a synthesis that would profoundly influence later medieval Islamic philosophy. Al-Kindi's contributions extended equally into the sciences. He worked extensively on mathematics, astronomy, optics, medicine, and music theory. He perceived mathematics not merely as a study of numbers, but as an essential tool to understand nature. According to him, no scientific inquiry could be complete without mathematical foundations. This belief helped him make significant advancements in astronomy, where he studied the motions of the sun and moon, seasonal cycles, and the influence of planets and stars. Although interested in astrology, Al-Kindi approached it with a scientific lens, emphasizing critical analysis over superstition. In medicine, Al-Kindi's work was especially notable. While influenced by the Greek physician Galen, he introduced original concepts, such as highlighting the importance of mental state and environment in health and disease, ideas remarkably consistent with modern psychosomatic medicine. His medical treatises discuss both treatment and prevention, emphasizing a holistic approach to health. In the field of optics, Al-Kindi's research inspired later scientists like Ibn al-Haytham. He experimented with the nature of light and color, attempting to explain human vision. He proposed that light travels in straight lines and that color depends on the type of light reflected by objects. Although his theories have since been refined by modern physics, they represented revolutionary ideas for the medieval period. Al-Kindi's expertise extended to music as well. He regarded music not just as entertainment, but as a mathematical and therapeutic discipline. He investigated how melody, rhythm, and frequency affect human mood and health, believing that music could calm the mind and even aid healing processes. Despite his successes, Al-Kindi's life was not without challenges. His ideas sometimes met resistance from contemporary religious scholars, who accused him of excessive attachment to Greek philosophy. His efforts to interpret certain Quranic verses through logic and philosophy were viewed with suspicion. During the reign of Caliph al-Mutawakkil, his political position weakened, and he faced temporary disgrace. Nevertheless, his relentless pursuit of knowledge continued until the end of his life. The essence of Al-Kindi's contribution during this phase lies in his holistic worldview, which wove together science, philosophy, religion, and art into a coherent intellectual fabric. He believed that the human mind's capacity was a precious gift from God, and that through this capacity, humans could uncover the mysteries of creation. This perspective earned him the title, the first-era philosopher, and ensured that his works influenced European Renaissance thinkers centuries late. The final phase of Al-Kindi's life centers on the enduring legacy of his philosophy and science, as his research, writings, and ideas began to influence subsequent generations of Muslim and European philosophers and scientists. Despite experiencing some decline in his political standing toward the end of his life, Al-Kindi never ceased his relentless pursuit of knowledge. He continued his extensive scholarly works, persistently striving to integrate philosophy and science in a coherent and unified worldview. Al-Kindi placed great emphasis on demonstrating the power of reason and philosophy in harmony with the message of Islam. In his view, faith and reason were not in conflict. Rather, when working together, they facilitated a clearer understanding of truth. He played a significant role in spreading the rationalist Mu'tazilite approach within Islamic thought. Although due to subsequent historical and political developments, this school of thought's prominence somewhat diminished. Nonetheless, Al-Kindi's reason-based method laid a strong foundation for future Islamic philosophy. During this stage of his life, his creativity and scientific insight deepened further. He explored complex theories in algebra and geometry and sustained his research in optics and music theory. His analyses of music's effect on the human mind were revolutionary. He elucidated how melody and rhythm can influence emotions and mental states, a pioneering idea that today forms the foundation of music therapy. Though many of his manuscripts and treatises have been lost to history, Al-Kindi's theories were further developed by later Muslim philosophers and scientists such as Al-Farabi, Ibn Sina Avicenna, and Ibn Rushd Averroes. His influence extended into the European Renaissance, where echoes of his rationalistic philosophy can be distinctly felt. Al-Kindi was not merely a philosopher or a scientist. He was a profound teacher and thinker who sought to push the boundaries of knowledge. In the latter part of his life, he devoted himself to disseminating knowledge among students and promoting scholarly inquiry. Within Baghdad's intellectual circles, he established a strong foundation that served as a cornerstone for Islamic scholarship for centuries. Nevertheless, his life was not free from political tension and ideological disputes. Due to differences in religious and philosophical viewpoints, he sometimes faced political hostility. His innovative and reasoned approach often clashed with more traditional perspectives, resulting in periods of marginalization from the court. Yet his steadfast conviction and perseverance enabled him to return and continue spreading the light of knowledge. Ultimately, Al-Kindi passed away in 866 CE, but his work and intellectual vision remain alive to this day. Remembered as a first-era philosopher in Islamic cultural and scientific history, his perspective on knowledge and reason continues to guide generations. Al-Kindi's life and legacy teach us that the pursuit of knowledge is never confined or finite. It is an ongoing journey that blends intellect, creativity, and dedication. Al-Kindi remains an immortal genius and unparalleled thinker in history. He was the first-era philosopher who successfully integrated Greek philosophy and science into Islamic civilization. His work went beyond merely expanding Islamic scholarship. It ignited a new light in the global intellectual heritage of the medieval world. Through Al-Kindi's efforts, a bridge was built between reason, philosophy, science, and religion, a bridge that guided later generations of Islamic philosophers and scientists. We remember Al-Kindi not just as a scientist or philosopher, but as a great symbol of intellectual awakening of his time, who contributed immensely to the growth of inquiry, logic, and human intellect. His philosophy teaches us that science and religion are not opposing forces, but complement and enrich one another. Even in the modern era, his rational and creative thinking continues to illuminate our path toward knowledge. Al-Kindi's contributions to Islamic civilization are incomparable. He viewed knowledge and science as a form of worship to God, inspiring us to pursue lifelong learning and exploration. Therefore, we remember him not only as a figure of the past, but as a living light guiding ongoing education and scientific progress. Hence, Al-Kindi's name will remain eternal in the history of knowledge and science, for he was the first bridge builder who transcended cultures, languages, and eras to spread the light of truth and wisdom. His life and work teach us that the pursuit of knowledge never ends. It is a continuous journey toward new horizons.